Hello there. It is December the 23rd, 2022. I've got a question from someone. I don't know exactly where they are at. This is from Susan. But this question is an interesting one. It's about the 7 tenets of the church, the things that people are supposedly supposed to be doing, or that these are the fundamental teachings of what it means to be a Christian. The question is, I heard preached there are 7 tenets of the church: worship, prayer, stewardship, evangelism, missions, discipleship, fellowship, and community. And this is extracted from Acts chapter 2. So is this accurate according to the correct teaching of God's word, or is this just more indoctrination? That's the question. All right, now when it comes to the kind of question of is this correct according to the teaching of God's word, I tend to shy away from that kind of a phrase. The reason why is because I'm more interested in the Lord himself as a person than I am interested in what is the teaching that we are to try and embrace. I get a little bit concerned about people embracing the teaching more than the person who taught it. So I do tend to shy away from phrases such as the correct teaching of God's word, that kind of thing. I tend to shy away from that a little bit. You won't hear me say those kinds of things like you'll hear other people say those kinds of things, because I'm a little bit more interested in the person who did the teaching. Not to say that I'm not interested in the teaching. It's just that I think it's easy for people to try to have a relationship with the teaching and not the person who taught it. All right. But what we have here is we have 7 different topics that apparently are the tenets, or are the things, that if you are a Christian, then these need to be a part of your life in order to define yourself as a Christian. In effect, that's what it kind of becomes. The first thing I'd like to mention is this idea of Acts chapter 2. What I've watched happen often throughout the years is I've watched people study the book of Acts, especially Acts chapter 2, and they look to see, well, what were the early disciples doing? What was the early church like? And if we understand, the idea is that if we understand how the early church was functioning and what they were like, if we understand that, then we can duplicate that, and that would be the closest representation of the way things should be. All right, now that's the assumption, though. The assumption is that the early church was a representation of the way the things should be, okay? And it's okay if you want to make that assumption, and it's okay if you want to get started with something like that. If it works to get something going and to get a group meeting together and that sort of thing, then I don't want to discourage it. However, what people often do is they suggest that this is the better way, the better path, or the more valid approach as to how we are going to be Christians. And saying something like that, I think is out of place. I just do. From what I can tell, the early church did not have it all together right away. They had a long ways to go. If you want to study Acts chapter 2, that's fine. I do that. I've taught on it. I think it's great. But if you want to assume that this is a representation of mature, seasoned believers who had it all together, you need to keep reading. Make it to Acts chapter 10 and Acts chapter 11 and realize that it was then that the early church discovered that a Gentile could be saved without first becoming a Jew. If I was to say that right now, okay, folks, you got to become a Jew before you can become a Christian. I would hope that you would be kind and polite and say something like, gosh, Aaron, that sounds really interesting, but I think you ought to mature a little bit more in your faith before you continue to do as much work as you're doing. I would hope that you might be that polite, but if you're not, I would understand. Okay, so they had a long ways to go. But let me address each one of these 7 items just briefly in order to say a few things about them to try to put this in the context of what people are actually doing. All right. So what we got here? We've got worship, prayer, stewardship, evangelism, missions, discipleship, and fellowship and community. I'll just go right down the list. Let's start with worship. Okay, well, what is worship? What is that really? It is written that presenting yourself to God is your reasonable form of worship. And to me, that is the better definition, that we present ourselves person to person to be connected with our God. All right, that's my personal feeling about the subject of worship. That how do I worship my God? I worship Him every day, with an acknowledgement of His presence in my life, my presence in His life, and I make myself available for Him to make use of if there are opportunities or circumstances or situations where I may be useful to the Lord. And in the meantime, I will present myself to Him in the event that there is something that He might be willing to share with me. And I also can ask Him questions about things, and sometimes He may reply and give me some insights and discernment on these things that I have an interest in or these things that I'm being confronted with in my daily life. To me, that is the fundamental basis of worship. That's how I view it. But the most common way that people interpret this word is they consider this to be the worship service. That's how most people are thinking about this word whenever they hear it or make use of it. And I don't want to say there's anything bad about that, because I don't feel that there's anything bad about the collective worship service of the singing and music and community activity in that sense. I think it's a good thing. On occasion, I go and spend time with people who are into this, but I don't think that's really what God had in mind when He was using the word worship, at least not in the most important way. All right. So I'm not going to say that it's evil or that it's bad. I don't think that that's the primary definition or the application or the tenet that this word should be used for, but that's what most people are thinking. When they put this word in a list like this, in general, they're saying, you need to show up at the appointed time when we all get together so that we can sing these songs, play this music, or some places don't play any music, and other places that's all they do is play music. Sometimes you join in on the singing, other times they have a special worship band, that you observe, and that's okay. I think that's fine. But but I don't think that this is really what He's after when He's talking about the idea of worship. I think that this can be appreciated, and I think that the Lord can make use of this. I do. But this is what people are generally thinking, and I am generally not thinking this when the word worship is applied. So what is it that people are really after when they're using this word and they're using this in a list such as this? They want to get people to assemble together. All right, that's what they're thinking. We just need people to assemble together. And the worship service is definitely an effective way of getting people to assemble together, and that's great. Okay? Unfortunately, in most cases, from my point of view, this appears to be more like a religious entertainment center. Okay? I know some of you may be shocked by that, so I'll say it again. A religious entertainment center is what most of these places are kind of structured into being and how they are generally functioning. And you can draw in a big crowd, if you've got a good band, you can. All right? And these circumstances and environments have been used in order to draw people to the Lord, So, hey, we should say that that's a good thing. Absolutely. As I have attended, and I probably will continue to attend many of these religious entertainment experiences in the future, I I have found that the overwhelming majority of the people who I've been around in that kind of a setting, especially after having conversations with them, I have found that in general, they don't really know the Lord. They just don't. If I ask people the question, well, what is the gospel? How would you describe it? What does it mean to you? It's very, very difficult to find someone who will give an answer of any kind, whether it's right or wrong or close or not. They're really just there for the entertainment. It's good music, good feeling. We can wave our hands. It's about the activity, and it's about being a part of a group of people. And it's fun and it's entertaining. And I don't want to say that there's something wrong with it. And there are people who can be drawn to the Lord through an experience like this. All right. But this is what people are thinking when it comes to worship. And I don't think that this is fundamentally what God had in mind when it came to the topic of worship. But as long as you show up, all right, as long as you show up, it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what you believe. As long as you show up and you do the worship thing, you will have fulfilled tenet number 1. All right? And you can do that. Same thing with prayer. There are prayer services. Not so many people will attend prayer services in comparison with the worship services, so you try to integrate the two a little bit. Integrate the prayer in with the worship service and get the people praying a little bit more. Sometimes you can get people to pray on their own. You can have prayer lists. You can pass out prayer requests. There's all kinds of things like that. But in most cases, what people are thinking is they're thinking, well, this is my chance, this is my opportunity to ask for God's divine intervention in circumstances that we can't do anything about. That's usually what that means. There are situations and circumstances that we just can't do anything about or anything more than we have already done. So now we call upon God for his divine intervention to do something. And I just don't think that that's really what prayer is from God's point of view. I think that there's a place for that. There can be a place for that. All right. But primarily, to me, the word prayer is nothing more than an exotic word to describe talking with God. All right. I'll say it again because I know that might sound a little shocking. But to me, from what I can tell, the word prayer is nothing more than an exotic word. All right, that means that we are talking to or with God. All right, just like we're talking to each other, talking with anybody else. So I don't think that we need to define this as a specific tenet. If a person is going to be talking with God, they should be doing that. And, the better conversations happen when there are 1 or 2 people present. And so when you get a whole group of people together, we're all going to gang up on God. And if we get enough people praying, well, he'll feel the pressure, and he'll do something. I don't think that's appropriate. I think that's more like, coercion than anything. So there are different ways that people may approach this. And I don't want to say that we should not do certain things because, I will participate in those things on occasion. But do not forget that the real prayer happens when you are by yourself and with the Lord, not when you're with the community or with the group, all right, not in comparison, okay, in comparison. So for this to be a tenet, well, okay, you get people praying. Well, anybody can pray, especially those people who think that God only exists to intervene in divine ways in our lives. That's what he's for. He's there to give us stuff and to do stuff for us that we either don't want to do for ourselves or we can't do for ourselves, but that's the relationship between us and God. And you can find lots of people like that. And they don't have to know him at all. They don't have to know anything about him at all. They do not have to have a relationship with God to engage in this kind of prayer. All right? And there's other models as well. For example, the predefined prayers. This was my life before I came to know the Lord Jesus. In the synagogue, all the prayers were predefined, pre-written, pre-approved, That's easy. You don't even have to believe that there's a God in order to say those prayers. Is there a God? Well, that doesn't have any relevance. Who cares? I'm praying. You're not. So I am a good person, and you are not. For a lot of people, that's what it was about. It still is for a lot of people. That's what it's about. So you can get people worshiping, you can get people praying, but, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to know the Lord, and so it's a tenet, okay, and you can get people to do it, and I don't want to say that there's, something bad about it. I'm just saying that you can get the impression that this is what it means to be a Christian. And yet it just isn't, not from that point of view when I put it in that context. Stewardship, tenet number 3. Stewardship. What does this mean? What are they saying? They're saying how you handle your money. Okay? Now, I've got a lot to say about that. I did a series of programs you can find on the Living God Ministries radio archive on tithing. I got a lot to say about that, and so I would encourage you to listen to those programs. I'm going to warn you that the first one, of course, is the shock and awe. All right. So if you make it past the first one, the second one is kind of when I really get into the topic. The first one is the shock and awe, and that's when I usually get the most complaints whenever I broadcast those on the radio stations. But there's a lot that can be said about that. What is it that they mean when they say that this is a tenet of the church, though? What does this mean? I'll tell you what this means. This means that this is extortion, okay? That's what this is. This is, fundamentally, it is extortion. You will give us your money. You'll give your money to the church, or God will hurt you. He'll probably take it away from you. If you don't give it, he's going to take it. That kind of thing. This is extortion. And it turns out that throughout the centuries, the majority of Christianity has survived and functioned by extortion. Okay? That's the way it is. And the reason why is because there's a lot of money to be made in extortion. Now if I said, give me your money or I will find some way to hurt you, well, that would be a crime, right? But if I say, give me your money or God is going to hurt you, well, that's all of a sudden holy and righteous. Okay? This is what people are thinking. And that's what they're thinking when they're thinking in terms of stewardship. Are you going to be proper and wise with the money that you have earned? All right. I don't see that in the scriptures at all. I just don't. What I see is that it has to do with what your God has given to you. Okay. Now the money that you have earned. All right. Now if you are in a unique circumstance where it seems abundantly obvious that God has intervened in your life in a divine way so that you have been able to obtain this increase in money in some way, then go ahead. Acknowledge the truth that is something that God has done for you. And if you want to share a part of that, then by all means, you just go right ahead. You do that. I don't want to discourage that, okay? But what most people are experiencing is that they work themselves, and God is not intervening in their life in terms of what they're getting for their compensation for their labor and things like that. Not necessarily. They're probably getting paid the same amount that everybody else is, who don't believe that there's a God at all. They might even be getting paid less. All right? So, I don't see that. I mean, I suppose you could get close to it if you're a farmer, If you're a farmer and you depend on the Lord to intervene with the weather, there could be more opportunities for God to intervene in your farm, in that way. And that is fundamentally what the tithe was about. It was about what you produced, okay, in terms of the grain, and the fruit from the trees and other stuff in your flocks, your herd. It wasn't about what you were able to produce in terms of other things, of goods and services that were from these fundamental things that were produced on a simple level such as that. All right. So, there's a lot to be said about the subject of where it is that you obtain your wealth and how you obtain it. But either way, the idea of stewardship has nothing to do, from my point of view, okay? It has nothing to do with your money. I just don't see it. To me, what stewardship has to do with what God has given to you, and what he has given to you is the truth, okay? That's what he's given to you. All right, now if he's given you money, you can show that on your bank statements. All right, you can do that. You can go to your bank statements and you can see that, look, oh my goodness, from the account of God, it's got a bunch of sevens in it maybe, the account number, all right, that he did a wire transfer, all right, then I would go for that, that this came from God, by all means, I have a bank account and I have never received a transfer from God's account. I haven't, now for those who donate to the work that I'm doing, I consider every donation to be holy and sanctified, and needs to be treated with the utmost respect as if it is the property of God. And I have always done that, without question. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that people are making an assumption about stewardship, that it has to do with money, and I just don't think so. All right, I don't see that, but most people do. That's fine. I just look at things differently. From my point of view, the stewardship has to do with the truth that God has revealed to you. Now, that's something that I can say something about. All right, absolutely. That God has revealed the truth to each one of us, and that we are to be good stewards of the truth that he has revealed. That we are to apply the truth that he has revealed to us in our own lives, and that we are to share that with other people. Okay, that to me is what stewardship is truly about. All right, so tenet number 3, stewardship. People are thinking what you're doing with your money, and whether you're giving it to them or not. Okay. To me, stewardship is about the truth. And what are you doing with the truth that God has revealed to you? Okay. Now, like I said, with the radio ministry that I teach through Living God Ministries, that is an opportunity for people to give of the money that they earn. This is fundamentally what it is. It is a structure through which people can give money that they have earned, so that the truth that God has revealed can be broadcasted out to whoever may tune in to those radio stations. That's what it really is. That's what it's about. It is a mechanism through which people can give and they can promote the truth. And there are a lot of other ministries who function in a similar way. In a similar way. But you have to decide: is that the truth that they are teaching, or is it not? And if it is, then consider supporting them. And if it's not, then don't. Then you're not being a good steward when it comes to the topic of the truth. Okay? Absolutely not. All right, number 4, evangelism. Okay, now it depends on what people are thinking when it comes to evangelism too. I think that we might find an agreement, myself and others, we might find an agreement with this one, of the idea of evangelism, that we should be actively involved in other people's lives so that we can communicate the truth of the Lord to them. And I think that this is a good thing. Like I said, I think this does fit in the category of stewardship, but that evangelism ourselves is something that we can actively be a part of. And look, folks, if you've run out of people to talk with about the Lord, go make some new friends, Really. Go make some new friends. Go get involved in other people's lives. Change jobs. Change employers, or get a job. Or join a club of some kind. Just get out there and make some new friends. Go to church, and make some new friends that you can evangelize. All right. Now, if you go to church, you're probably going to find people who kind of maybe already know the Lord. It's not the same as going to find a bunch of lost people. And so go find out, what are the lost people doing in your area, and go hang out with them for a little while, so that maybe you can make friends with them and talk with them about the Lord, and if they're not receptive, go find some more, Let that be a part of your life, that you are actively, every once in a while, making some new friends and talking with people about the Lord. That's what evangelism is. That's what evangelism is about. And look, I do a lot through radio broadcasting and the such, and through videos like this. But there is still no better comparison with the one-on-one conversation that a person has with somebody else. I do a lot. I'm very effective with what I do for the most part. But still, you having a person-to-person, a heartfelt conversation with somebody else will always be the more effective means by which you can evangelize another person. So don't eliminate that from your life experience. Missions, that usually has to do with you supporting other people in doing this. And there are a lot of different mission kind of activities in the radio world. A lot of the people who are broadcasting on radio, they are supported by churches and Christian foundations. They just are. For Living God Ministries, I know of one foundation that is supporting the radio ministry. They're not the largest donor per se. They do give a lot, and it's very, very, very nice. But they're just like some of the upper end donors per se. There are no churches that are supporting the ministry. I think there's one that might have, but I'm not sure that they're even really a fully functional church as you would expect there to be a church. The work that I do is completely funded in that sense, besides those two exceptions, one exception and one possible exception. Everything is done by individual persons who collectively are banded together through the organization and are able to do the work that the Living God Ministries radio program does. And it's very effective. But the other people, the other ministries that are broadcasting on there, boy, they have got a lot of churches that support them. And so what people are talking about as a tenet of the church, for you to be a part of the church, is that you are to be a good steward, all right? And you are to give to the church and to give for missions as well, because the church also supports missions. And it is very common for churches to support the local radio ministries, all right, because there is a relationship between the radio ministries and the churches. The relationship is that the radio ministries are supported as a mission of the church, and then they engage in evangelism through the radio broadcast, and then encourage the people in the local area to go find a local church. And of course they make recommendations based on which churches are donating to their ministries. Okay? And they say on their radio programs quite often, always support your local church first. Why? Because they get a cut. They get a percentage off of what you're giving to the local church, especially the ones that they recommend. And so there is a big relationship, a symbiotic relationship between a lot of the churches and the radio ministries that are out there. Now, let me say this, okay? In terms of measurable effectiveness, and the percentage of donations, even though Living God Ministries just kind of barely makes it in comparison, percentage-wise, Living God Ministries does about twice as well, okay? Twice as well in terms of people growing to know the Lord, and also about twice as well in terms of donations, even though there is this symbiotic relationship that exists between the missions of the churches, okay, and the evangelism of the radio ministries. Okay, the reason why it's not so easy to see is because it's just so many. The size is enormous. But percentage-wise, Living God Ministries does about twice as well. That's what I've been able to measure, and I have enough access to data to be able to do a good measurement to be able to say that. So when it comes to missions, that is one way of looking at it. Another way to look at it is you're going to go to a foreign country of some kind, and a lot of people look at that as like a vacation. We're going to go on vacation. We're going to help some nice people who are in need, and they're going to see that we like them, that we love them, and because we like them and we love them, maybe they'll become Christians. And hey, it works in a lot of cases, and so absolutely, I would encourage that to be continued. But you'll notice that this is unique to our country and to our nation. And it's also unique to our economy as well, and the way that our economy has been functioning and structured for like the last 100 years. And that is changing. And so the way that missions are being done right now, that's going to be different in the future. 10, 20 years from now, that model is going to look different, all right? Very different. All right. But, another way to say this is that you are to go on missions, okay? Whether you're doing evangelism through the missions or not, just go and be a part of the missions. Do the service projects, that kind of thing. And I will say that that's okay, but there are other more effective ways to do that for the most part, and to look for, in some cases, more effective ways. If the Lord should send you, put it on your heart to do that, you do that, and not worry at all about how you might do measurements. This is important. I just gave you a description of measurements in terms of the work that I've been doing. But listen, there's something different, and that is if the Lord directly tells you, look, go do this, do not use any measurements whatsoever. If he sends you, you go. And if you go, you are put. And if you know who sent you and you know who put you, then you do not need to have any concern with regards to what the results may or may not be. You are to be true to your God. All right? Now let's see here. What's the next one? Discipleship. Okay, discipleship. That is a tenet of the church, right? That's number 6, or almost at number 7. So if this is number 6, discipleship, think about that for a moment. We got to get everybody to worship. That's number 1. Prayer, number 2. And, of course, their money, number 3. Evangelism, go recruit some new people. And missions, give a good image. And then discipleship comes after all of that, right? Okay, discipleship comes after all of that. That's number 6 on the list. All right, well, how effective is the discipleship? I gave you an example of the question that I would ask often in a worship service and in other places. How would you describe the gospel? What does that mean to you? All right, now, you ask that question long enough, and you realize that whatever discipleship is going on is not what you would expect. It just isn't. You would think that people would be able to give a reasonable answer to that kind of a question. But the percentage of people who will give a reasonable answer to that kind of a question is relatively low, And so this may be a tenet of the church, but I think the discipleship might be leaning a little bit more towards tenet number 1, 2, and 3, worship, prayer, and give us your money. That might be the discipleship that they might be really thinking of when you really look at it. Fellowship and community. I'll tell you, it's very lonely to be among 1,000 people in a worship service who pretty much don't know the Lord. It's a very lonely experience. I endure it every once in a while, but it still is a very lonely experience. And so when it comes to having fellowship and community, there is a huge difference between being a member of a large group of people and being around people who know the Lord as you do. There's a huge difference, okay? And that if you are around people who just don't really know the Lord, they can call that a fellowship, they can call that a community all they want. But I would say that the Lord himself would probably find it to be a lonely experience to be around them. Okay? So that, that needs to be better quantified and described. All right? Now, when it comes to the work that I've been doing, it's very difficult to get an assembly of people. It is. It's very hard to get an assembly of people based on our common beliefs. All right? And you need to understand that this is mainly because what I teach, what we believe is just not that common. It's not that popular. And so percentage-wise, it's just tough. It's really hard to get a group of people together of any substantial size. And so you need to stick with the 1 or 2 or 3 people or 5 people who you know or who you have encountered. You need to stick with them, as best you can while continuing to make new friends. You need to do that. And consider that this can be a good thing. And let me tell you why. When I have assembled a large group of people together, they don't engage in the evangelism and the missions anymore. They just quit. They don't go out and engage with new people to help new people grow to know the Lord. They just say, okay, we got our church, here we go. It's all us, it's all together. And I don't think that's just, I just don't think that's what the Lord had in mind. And so the good thing is, when you don't have a significant assembly of some kind, when you don't have that, well then, if you want to be around other believers, you're going to have to go look for them, And what will happen is that you're going to end up going to other churches. And these are going to be places that you're going to feel alone in, and it's going to be hard to find people. But I'll tell you, out of 100 people, you may be able to find one who knows the Lord in a way that is close enough to the way that you know him, that you can have some degree of fellowship with them. So, if you find a 200-member church, maybe you find 2 people, maybe. And that's great, that's a good thing. Okay, what does this do? This effectively will drive us to go out and spread the truth that he has revealed. It will encourage us to be good stewards, all right? Stewards, because we want to be around other believers. If we do, well, then engage in evangelism, and make some new believers. Or go out and seek other believers as your missionary activity or whatever. And so this pushes us out into the world where there are people who need to be saved, or who need to know the Lord a little bit better than the way that they do, to know the way of God a little bit more accurately, as Apollos, for example. As Aquila and Priscilla spoke with Apollos and explained to him the way of God a little bit more accurately, all right, in the book of Acts. And this is good. This is good. And in that way, you can build communities. Now, I'm doing this video right now, and I have been presenting videos on Sunday mornings for a couple of years now, and those have been designed to help people to build home fellowships. That's what I'm doing. That's what I have been doing, and it's been working okay. It's been working just fine. I know that that there's not very many views on those videos right now, but look, I've recorded them to be an archive for people to use 5 or 10 years from now. That's what I'm doing. Is I've designed them to be used in the future more than they are to be used in the present. And when you see one view tick up here and there, it's not normally one person. Later on, it's groups of people, of 4, 5, 6 people who are getting together and they're watching the video together. That's what those are made for, so that I can be available and help and be a participant in building small assemblies of like-minded believers. And it's working, it's doing okay. And maybe they will grow to be of substantial size. But I would say that if you do, I would discourage you from getting to be too big and maybe consider splitting up into 2 groups, because the objective is for people to grow to know the Lord, not to just build some new church and community per se. The community, the soundness and the value of the community is based on people knowing the Lord together. All right, that they know him and that they come together because of their common relationship with him more than their common relationship with one another. That's what makes it real, and that's what makes it of the real fundamental value and purpose that I think we should be thinking about when it comes to fellowship and community. All right, so that's how I would approach these 7 tenets and what people are thinking. Most of the time when people are using this idea of fellowship and community, they're just trying to get people into the building so that they can talk with them about stewardship. That's what most people are really after. That's kind of the objective that that most of the folks have when they are using this idea of fellowship and community as a tenet of the church. And if you're going to be a good Christian, this is what they mean, is that you have to show up at the appointed time to be a part of the community, and so that as a group effort, you can be extorted with the idea of stewardship. Okay, that's really what they're doing and what they're thinking. I think that it should be something different, that it should be based on your relationship with your God, and that is where the real fellowships and communities are found. Okay, I hope that this helps. If you do have any questions for me, go ahead and send them to me directly to my email, aaron@aaronbudgeon.net. Thanks.